Hello and welcome to Chapter 4, the Human Resource Function. Now, this chapter is really important because CIMA recognise that at any given point in your careers, you will be perhaps involved in managing people, and therefore it's important to understand how the human resource function works, how you manage people, how you motivate people in order to retain those good people that you have working in your organisation. Now, sometimes within an organisation, employees are referred to as being called human capital. And what this means is that employees are referred to as being assets. Now, they're really hard to value, so they don't feature in your statement of financial position, but nevertheless, they contribute to the company's success. So, in terms of the definition, a key term to learn for this chapter is human resource management is a strategic approach to acquiring, developing, managing and motivating an organisation's people. Now, the idea is that if you think of the organisation's structure, a traditional structure, so as part of a long triangle, which is made up of 3 layers. Now, at the bottom, we have the operational layer. In the middle, we have the business layer. And at the top, we have the strategic layer. Okay. Now, within the operational layer, we have the workforce, stroke your supervisors, managers. Now, in the middle layer, we have the business unit managers, so your middle line managers. And at the top, we have the board of directors, the guys that steer the company forward. Now, traditionally, the human resource function was down here in the operational sector, in the operational section of the organisation, around 15-20 years ago. However, this function has now moved into the strategic layer because it's understood that managing people, making people happy is one of the core objectives of an organisation. And that's what we mean by stating that key distinction can be seen in terms of a shift in the importance of people management from an operational low-level function to a strategic function managed by senior managers. Now, human resource management recognises the importance of staff to sustaining competitive advantage, which is why it's really important to keep your staff happy, to keep them motivated. Otherwise, the organisation will lose the staff. They'll go and work somewhere else if they're not happy with where they're working for you. And in turn, they'll take those skills that they've developed, they'll take all that experience that they have to one of your competitors, say. Now, if we move on to the second section of this chapter, the objectives of human resource management. Now, traditionally, people always think of the human resource function being involved with the first point. So to meet the organisation's social and legal responsibilities relating to staff and employment. So we think their role is to make sure that, say, the human resource function has effective contracts in place with all employees, make sure that our recruitment policy isn't one that's discriminating between employees, we're not just recruiting men, etc. However, it is also important to recognise that the human resource function looks at all these ideas as well. Just cross this out because that's repeat. So it deals with all of the ideas in terms of to develop an effective pool of employees, to obtain and develop human resources in terms of motivating employees effectively, and to make sure that there are good working relationships between employees in an organisation. So it's overall good management practice to make sure that the human resource function is involved in planning for the future, making sure that employees have flexible working arrangements, make sure that we have a flexible workforce, in times of need, when we have high demand of our goods, products, and so on. So that they're not just involved in making sure that if every employee has a contract of employment in place. So in terms of the importance of effective human resource management in an organisation, the key thing is that overall we need to have good human resource management in place. Otherwise, we'll have lots of people leaving. It'll be an absolute chaos within an organisation. We don't know who's coming, who's going, what our needs will be in terms of training, developing employees. So the key thing that human resource management are involved in is making sure that we reduce staff turnover, because we can all imagine how disruptive it is in the organisation we work with. If people are leaving constantly, there's no continuity. But other things that they are involved in as well is making sure that they improve the efficiency and effectiveness of teams. So changes and improvement are achieved quite easily within an organisation. So these are all the things that a good HR practice makes happen in an organisation. Now, section 4, we've got the human resource cycle, the HR cycle, and the human resource function within an organisation can be viewed as a 4-stage cycle. So we've got the first stage, acquisition, and this is where we are hiring staff, so the higher stage. The next stage we've got as development, and this is where we are training staff to perform their roles. The next stage, maintenance, well, we're effectively incentivising employees, we're paying them. It could be in monetary terms, non-monetary terms. And the last stage of a human resource cycle is separation, where employees leave. And this cycle continues on from start to finish, and we start again at the first stage. So this process is referred to as a cycle unless the organisation stops play. So the organisation will always require some employees, some staff, to be able to continue operations. So in this chapter, we'll cover the HR perspective from a high level, and then in the next chapter, chapter 5, we'll be looking at it from a more detailed perspective in terms of what they do. Moving on to section 5, human resource planning. Now, this is where the organisation's HR plan is a strategy which is developed within the context of its business strategy. So it has to go alongside its business plan. For instance, let's say the business plan is for us to start developing a new product, which would mean that we would need to employ more people to help develop that product. And therefore, we need to make sure that whatever we're taking part in as part of our HR strategy goes alongside with what our long-term plans, long-term aims are for the organisation. And so a typical human resource plan would be as follows. So we would have the strategic review take place of the company's staff's current weaknesses, strengths, opportunities, threats, and so on. And this is where we're trying to understand, well, what will we need? What is it that we've got versus what is it that we'll need? So alongside strategic review, what do we need? Okay. Versus, as mentioned, well, what have we got? So the audit of existing HR staff, in effect providing a stock take of the company's current staff in terms of their numbers and skills. So who have I got? And thereafter, we would forecast demand and supply based on our predicted future needs. Because with our employees, we can't bank on certainty. We might have employees that are leaving that we're not aware of. So we need to forecast. We might have some employees going on maternity leave, some employees that are just considering jumping into your competitor, into another industry, and therefore we need to be able to bridge the gap, forecast the demand and supply. And thereafter, we need to have an action plan in place to reconcile any gaps between demand and supply. And this is where we are bridging the gap. And this would involve us training our current staff, updating their skills. We might have staff that are up for promotion, going up the organisational ranks, and therefore we might need some lower level staff again if we have some lower level staff that are moving to a more senior position. We might need to have overtime agreements in place with staff in order for them to be flexible with working arrangements. We might need them for more time than it's originally placed in their contract. We may also need to recruit new staff based on the skills that we require, based on the number of staff that we require. And we might have potential redundancies in place. If we've got too much staff, we decide we've got too much of a workforce, labour force, and we don't actually need all of them for our needs. And therefore, we might have to have potential redundancies in place where we need to get rid of people. And therefore, points 1 to 4 mentioned on the previous page are all those things that would go into our HR plan. And remember, this HR plan has to work alongside our overall business plan. But we may come across practical problems in developing an accurate human resource plan. And there's 4 points listed, 4 of the common points, hurdles that we might come across. There may be unforeseen changes in demand and supply that we can't predict. Employees are unpredictable. Well, we might have lots of employees leaving the organisation where they're finding better opportunities elsewhere. There may be HR problems that we cannot quantify. Employees might have poor motivation and therefore they may say, we're not going to work to our hardest. And this is something that we can't really factor into an HR plan. There might be unpredictability of external factors, such as where we are in the economy. If we have a sudden recession in place, we've got more of a workforce than we actually need. Or if the economy starts to pick up, we need to quickly start hiring new people to help us develop these new products that we want to launch as part of the economy expansion. And finally, the last point, a more traditional point there, where tendency for management to see staff costs as something that can be easily cut in the short term. And this is where traditional old school managers see staff as costs. However, nowadays, and as I've mentioned before, staff are seen as assets. And therefore, you might have some managers within an organisation that see staff as costs. We can easily recruit people, we can easily fire people, but that's not really the case in terms of the whole concept of human capital. It might be really hard to obtain really good people to work within your organisation. So there are a few ideas listed there why it might be quite hard for us to come by having an accurate human resource plan. So I'll leave this chapter up until section 5, end of section 5 here, and in the next online recording we'll start off with section 6, how human resource management influences the organisation.